This is Land of Havilah, Isaiah 7. The vision of the last chapter was in the year King Uzziah died, which means it was the first year of King Jotham, who went on to reign 16 years, and after that Ahaz took his place. During Ahaz's reign, verse 1, in the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, Rezin the king of Syria, and Pekah the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to war against it, but could not prevail against it. Comment: the political geography of the time was that Judah and Israel were divided. Judah was on the south and Israel on the north. Israel was also known by the names Samaria, Ephraim, and the northern kingdom. And to the northeast of Israel there was Syria. Its capital was Damascus. As verse 1 just said, when Ahaz was king of Judah, the kings of Israel and Syria were Pekah and Rezin. Those two attacked Judah at separate times and carried off hundreds of thousands of captives from Judah. But they didn't prevail against Judah, as verse 1 says, because they failed to overthrow Ahaz. However, verse 2, David's house was told, Syria is allied with Ephraim. Comment: now Ahaz, who is of the house of David, hears his enemies Rezin and Pekah have allied themselves, and coming up he expects them to attack. Speaking of Ahaz, still in verse 2, his heart trembled and the heart of his people as the trees of the forest tremble with the wind. Comment: so Ahaz and Judah are deathly afraid of attack, and coming up Yahweh has a message for Ahaz that he'll send through Isaiah. Verse 3, then Yahweh said to Isaiah, go out now to meet Ahaz, you and Shear-Jashub your son, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway of the fuller's field. Tell him, be careful and keep calm. Don't be afraid, neither let your heart be faint because of these two tails of smoking torches, for the fierce anger of Rezin and Syria and the son of Remaliah, because Syria, Ephraim, and the son of Remaliah have plotted evil against you, saying, let's go up against Judah and tear it apart, and let's divide it among ourselves, and set up a king within it, even the son of Tabeel. This is what the Lord Yahweh says, it shall not stand, neither shall it happen. For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years Ephraim shall be broken in pieces, so that it shall not be a people, and the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is Remaliah's son. If you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. Comment in verses 3 to 9, Yahweh told Isaiah, in effect, go out to meet Ahaz. Tell him, don't be afraid of Rezin and Pekah. Yahweh called Rezin and Pekah two tails of smoking torches, which are torches burned to the nub, still smoking but no flame left. In other words, Yahweh says the two of them are has-beens and have no power left. He tells Isaiah to tell Ahaz, you've heard they plan to overthrow you and replace you with the son of Tabeel. That's the only mention of the son of Tabeel in the Scripture, so we don't know anything about him except that obviously Rezin and Pekah want to install him as the king of Judah. But Yahweh says, don't worry about them because I won't let them harm you, in verse 7. This was Yahweh supporting Ahaz, not for Ahaz's sake, but because of his promise to David that a man of his house would be on the throne forever, 2 Samuel 7:13. Furthermore, Yahweh tells Isaiah in verse 8 to tell Ahaz that within 65 years Ephraim will be broken in pieces so that it shall not be a people. That prophecy came to pass when the Assyrian Empire, not Syria, but the Assyrian Empire, carried off almost all Ephraim, also known as Israel. But Yahweh says in verse 9, if Ahaz won't believe, surely he shall not be established. So this good outcome for Ahaz depends on whether he'll believe the word of Isaiah. Now from what's coming up, Ahaz refuses to believe it. Therefore Yahweh says he'll give him any sign he wants that this prophecy is true. Verse 10, Yahweh spoke again to Ahaz, saying, ask a sign of Yahweh your God, ask it either in the depth or in the height above. But Ahaz said, I won't ask, I won't tempt Yahweh. Comment: it's ludicrous that as evil as Ahaz is, he sacrifices his children by fire to other gods and so on, that now he's pretending to be pious. He tells Isaiah he won't accept a sign from Yahweh because that would be putting Yahweh to the test. And Ahaz has too much respect for Yahweh to put him to the test, so Ahaz is completely false. Therefore Isaiah says to Ahaz and his entire house, the house of David, verse 13, he said, listen now, house of David, is it not enough for you to try the patience of men that you'll try the patience of my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Comment in verse 13, Isaiah says Ahaz is trying the patience of men, particularly the patience of Isaiah, that means, and he's trying Yahweh's patience because Yahweh's offering him a sweet deal that he'll prove himself to Ahaz, and it's frustrating that Ahaz won't take the deal. Ahaz doesn't believe Yahweh will protect him from Pekah and Rezin. He could have asked for the sun to come up on the wrong end of the sky or anything else as a sign, but he won't take Yahweh up on it. Then in verse 14, Yahweh said to him, in effect, you refuse to pick a sign? Okay, then I'll pick one for you. The virgin will conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. So why a random prophecy about the Messiah at this point, and why something so far in the future that Ahaz won't see it in his lifetime? What does the virgin birth of Jesus have to do with Ahaz, and what does it have to do with God running out of patience with him? In answer, the virgin birth means that Yahweh's cutting Ahaz off from being associated with the Messiah, because if there's a virgin birth, the Messiah won't come from Ahaz's seed. It's a disowning of Ahaz. It was a word that the Messiah will not come forth from his body. It'll play out that Ahaz's line will eventually lead to Joseph. Matthew chapter 1 traces that line, but then Joseph won't actually father the Messiah. Mary will conceive as a virgin, cutting Ahaz's body out of the picture, but still the Messiah will inherit the right to the throne through Ahaz's line. This is why twice already in this chapter, in verses 2 and 13, it was stated that this prophecy wasn't just to Ahaz, but to the house of David. But there's a hitch. God was already on record telling David that the Messiah would proceed from his own body, 2 Samuel 7:12. So how could God break that promise by bringing the Messiah forth from a virgin? Your narrator doesn't have all the answers, but we can start by affirming that the promise wasn't broken. Somehow the virgin birth was a disinheriting of Ahaz without disinheriting David. It probably has something to do with Joseph's two genealogies, the one in Matthew chapter 1 and the different one in Luke chapter 3. Matthew 1 gives the tracing of Jesus' legal right to the throne through Ahaz's line, and Luke 3 is perhaps Jesus' genetic connection to David through Mary, which is to say that Heli in the Luke genealogy is Joseph's father-in-law and Mary's father. That line goes back to David as well, so that would give David his promised bodily link to the Messiah. It's certainly possible in the law of Moses that a man, speaking of Joseph in this case, could have two lines of male-to-male inheritance, one legal and the other genetic, say a genetic father and a legal father, or in this case perhaps a father-in-law, same as it's possible for any of us in modern times to have one genetic father and another legal father, and thus two genealogies. If the listener will suffer one more technicality, there was a particular case in the law of Moses of one Zelophehad who had daughters but no sons, Numbers chapters 27 and 36. Zelophehad petitioned Moses that the daughters might receive his inheritance. Moses took it to Yahweh, and Yahweh granted it. It was thereafter written into the law of Moses that inheritance could pass to a woman, and from her to her husband and to the next generation. Accordingly, we don't know if Mary had brothers, but if she didn't, she would rightfully receive an inheritance from her father and pass that inheritance to Joseph upon marriage, and from Joseph to Jesus. Somehow or other, God had all the bases covered, and Jesus had two inheritances by two lines, both of them legal, one a claim to the throne of Israel and the other the biological link to David, so that in the case of Jesus' legal, biological, and prophetic inheritances, everything was on the up and up. Somehow Yahweh passed everything to Jesus that was due to him, while at the same time disestablishing Ahaz. And the prophecy of the virgin birth was a fulfillment of verse 9 of this chapter, that if Ahaz would not believe, he would not be established. Now regarding this person mentioned in verse 14 who will be born of a virgin, whose mother will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us, verse 15. He shall eat butter and honey when he knows to refuse the evil and choose the good. Comment, unlike Ahaz, this child will be a breath of fresh air. He'll refuse the evil and do the good from the time he's old enough to know the difference. As a result, he won't suffer self-inflicted wounds like Ahaz. He'll eat the butter and honey of success in Yahweh. He'll be established to the hilt, unlike Ahaz. Verse 16. For before the child knows to refuse the evil and choose the good, the land whose 2 kings you abhor shall be forsaken. Yahweh will bring on you, on your people, and on your father's house days that have not come from the day that Ephraim departed from Judah, even the king of Assyria. It'll happen in that day that Yahweh will whistle for the fly that's in the uttermost part of the rivers of Egypt, and for the bee that's in the land of Assyria. They shall come and shall all rest in the desolate valleys, in the clefts of the rocks, on all thorn hedges, and on all pastures. In that day the Lord will shave with a razor that is hired in the parts beyond the river, even with the king of Assyria, the head and the hair of the feet. It shall also consume the beard. Comment in verses 16 to 20 we just read, speaking about the kings of Syria and Israel that Ahaz is so afraid of. Speaking of them being forsaken, God will call on the Assyrian Empire to come from far off. From Mesopotamia it'll be. Assyria will come and destroy Syria and Israel. In verse 17, it'll be the biggest event in the area since Ephraim departed from Judah, meaning since the northern kingdom split off from Judah. Yahweh will whistle for the fly in Egypt, meaning Yahweh will call Egypt into the area as well. And the bee in Assyria, he's calling Assyria into the area. The 2 nations will approach from opposite directions, though not at the same time, and occupy the land. Those incursions will destroy the northern kingdom and Syria, and in verse 20, as far as it'll affect Judah, it'll be a close shave. Assyria will come in as a metaphorical razor and shave the metaphorical head and beard of Judah down to the hair of the feet, meaning Assyria will do damage without inflicting a fatal blow. Judah will be stripped but will survive. This came to pass in the time of Ahaz, that Assyria invaded, conquered Syria and Israel, and afterward, in the time of Ahaz's son Hezekiah, came ridiculously close to conquering Judah. Now concerning Israel and Judah, how those events will depopulate them, verse 21. It shall happen in that day that a man shall keep alive a young cow and 2 sheep, and it shall happen that because of the abundance of milk which they shall give, he shall eat butter, for everyone will eat butter and honey that is left within the land. It'll happen in that day that every place where there were 1,000 vines and 1,000 silver shekels shall be for briars and thorns. People will go there with arrows and with bow, because all the land will be briars and thorns. All the hills that were cultivated with the hoe, you shall not come there for fear of briars and thorns, but it shall be for the sending out of oxen and for the treading of sheep. Comment, currently Israel and Judah are full of people and cultivated, but in verses 21 to 25, when the land is depopulated, the cultivated areas will go to thorns and briars. There won't be enough people left in the land to tend the fields, orchards, and vineyards. The entire land will be for grazing and for wild bees. The few remaining in the land will be poor, maybe with 1 cow and a couple of sheep. They'll graze their animals among the briars, so the diet will include dairy products such as butter, and the diet will include honey because honey grows in the wild. They won't enjoy the cultivated items like grain, olives, and grapes. And the land will be good for hunting wild animals in verse 24, but it'll be difficult to go there because of the briars and thorns in verse 25. That's why Ahaz doesn't have to worry about his neighbors to the north. And as for Judah, they'll almost be destroyed as well, but not by Israel and Syria, because Yahweh will unleash Egypt and the Assyrian Empire on them. This is all reliable information, but Ahaz chooses not to believe it. If he had believed the word of Yahweh, he could have been established in verse 9. We can take a lot of lessons for ourselves from this chapter, but let's just point out one takeaway, that if we do not have faith that God will take care of our biggest problems, we will not be established. Maybe we'll even be cut off from the Messiah. Isaiah 8 is next.